Hello and welcome to ACT Prep. I'm your English teacher, Miss Bear. The last time we were together, you guys learned about modifiers. That's right. Good job. I'm glad somebody out there reminded me because I went blank all of a sudden. Yes, modifiers and how modifiers work and what they modify and how to fix those. So I'm glad you guys really dug in on that. Today, we're going to be looking at subordination, coordination, and parallelism. Before we dig too deep, though, I want to remind you that this is part of the larger section of skills called Conventions of Standard English, and that Conventions of Standard English compose more than half of the ACT test. And if you remember, I told you that the best way to practice any of the English portion of your ACT test is to do what? That's right. It is to edit your peers' essays, to be able to go in and look at the errors that were made and look at how you can make something better, either by editing their grammar, editing their sentences, and really playing with the sentence structure. Speaking of sentence structure, that is the sub-skill of the skills that we are working within today and for the next couple of lessons. Today specifically, we're looking at subordination, coordination, and parallelism. And before we get too involved in the actual test items, I'm going to explain about subordination, coordination, and parallelism according to ACT. What do they say is the best way to study or prepare for these kinds of questions? So let's look. Subordination, coordination, and parallelism are errors. They are errors that occur when a writer makes an error in connecting a subordinating clause to an independent clause or in connecting two independent clauses. Oh, gee, that sounds a lot like sentence structure, doesn't it? In that the two lessons ago when we talked about run-on sentences and fragments. Yes, we talked about connecting two independent clauses and how you connect them, right? We're still looking at that, just in a different way. You're more likely to make errors in subordination and coordination when you don't read back to the beginning of a sentence. Remember I said you've got to read the sentence in its entirety. If there's punctuation, remember I told you to put your hand where that punctuation mark is and go back to that capital letter so you know that's the beginning of the sentence and see, does that sentence have a complete, is it a complete sentence? Does it have a subject? Does it have a verb? And does it express a complete thought? Now, if there is a semicolon there or even a comma, put your hand over the portion before and go all the way to the period, exclamation mark or question mark, and does that part of the sentence, does it have a subject and a verb, and does it express a complete thought? Also, if it has a semicolon, it has to have a subject, a verb, and a complete thought, or does it have a comma and some type of conjunction? And we're going to talk about those different types of conjunctions here as well. All right, let's look into, parallel structure. What does that mean for parallel structure? That's when you have the repetition of some kind of chosen grammatical form within a sentence. A parallel list must begin and end the same way. So what does that mean? If I use a to be verb, all of my verbs in that list must be to be verbs. If I use ing, everything in that list needs to begin the same way. And we're going to dig in and see how ACT says to fix those issues. So, a subordinating conjunction versus a coordinating conjunction. What are those? Guys, you have, in subordinating conjunctions, you've heard this as a woobus, right? I know that that's funny. There are tons of subordinating conjunctions, and I ask that you study those. Go find the list of subordinating conjunctions and memorize that as a subordinating conjunction. What does that mean to subordinate? It means that It establishes time, place, reason, or condition. It is not a complete sentence without the subordinating conjunction. It is adding information to that main independent clause, establishing that relationship. All conjunctions establish a relationship. The coordinating conjunctions, coordinating means to join. You know those as fanboys, right? So look at the list of fanboys. Those are the only coordinating conjunctions. And then you need a list of those subordinating conjunctions. And you see that we've listed several of those on the board. I haven't listed all of them because there is absolutely no way to list them all and go through them in a video such as this. So let's look at how ACT is going to test you in these skills, right? So for subordination, there are two items in the test that you took, the practice test that you took. Item numbers 37 and 58 test subordination. So let's look at these. Originally from China, Celadon was further developed in the 10th and 11th centuries in Korea, in which inlaid designs and decorative elements were added. So in which is one of the subordinating conjunctions it's using. Does that particular conjunction work in this sentence? I say it does not, so we know A is not the correct sentence. So let's look at these others. B says, whereas. Originally from China, Celadon was further developed in the 10th and 11th centuries in Korea, whereas inlaid designs and decorative elements were added. That does not work. Now let's look at C. Originally from China, Celadon was further developed in the 10th and 11th centuries in Korea, where inlaid designs and decorative elements were added. That does sound like it's going to be correct. D is past. Originally from China, Celadon was further developed in the 10th and 11th centuries in Korea. Past inlaid designs and decorative elements were added. Well, past is not even a conjunction. So we know that is definitely not the answer. So your answer is where. Okay? Also in those lists of subordinating conjunctions, you need to understand what each of those subordinating conjunctions does. How is the relationship established? What do each one of those words, those conjunctions, mean, and what kind of relationship does it establish? And so that's really important that you study that, the relationships, because that's probably the most important, so that you choose the best subordinating conjunction for these sentences. All right, I'm not going to do number 58. I'm going to let you do it with a classmate, and then I want one person in the class to report back what you and your classmate discussed. Good job. All right, as a reminder, being promoted to lieutenant doesn't work with the who being your subject here. So you guys were right. Who had been promoted to lieutenant colonel in 1916. Great job. I am really proud of you guys for that one. I know I heard some great answers, and I'm not even going to explain that one any further because you guys did such a good job of your explanations. Let's move on to faulty subordination and coordination. And oh, this is just extra practice. I was like, did I forget what item number that was? No, I didn't. I just gave you extra practice. So this is a faulty subordination. So since he still led fishing trips and he taught kids about the environments of Biscayne Bay, this is a mistake using both subordinating and conjunction since. So we know that's a subordinating conjunction, and it uses the coordinating conjunction and. So you can't use both because it's not two independent, it's not a true independent clause. So how would you fix this one? You would say you could take out either the since or the and let's see how we would fix that. So if we say he still led fishing trips, comma, and he taught, and I'm just going to put an ellipsis there because he taught kids about the environment of Biscayne Bay. All right, so that's one way we could fix it. So we could also fix it with, there, I took it out there. We could also fix it by saying, since he still led fishing trips, comma, he taught kids. So there's two different ways that you can fix that faulty subordination and coordination issue. There are multiple ways. Remember, if you see something like this, you're probably going to see one thing that says, how would you not fix this? Which one of these answers would not fix the problem? So you're going to have one of those not questions that Ms. Hebert despises on the ACT. But that's okay. Just because I hate it doesn't mean you have to hate it. You may actually like it. You may go, ooh, I can do this, that, or the other. And you might like those. Personally, I do not. Let's look at parallelism, and let's look at one of the items that ACT uses. In fact, they're only using one that is strictly parallelism. So let's look at what that looks like on this practice test that you took. Item number 4 said, Anderson went on to stage technology-enhanced performance arts, direct music videos, and invent tools to manipulate sound. So what I want you to see here is she went on to do what? To stage, to direct, and to invent. All of those are present tense verbs. It says what she did, right? And so we could replace or put in front of all of these. She went on to stage this, to direct that, and to invent this. So if you work it that way, then you know that that this one is already parallel, so it is no change. If we changed the this underlined portion to the J, even though it's to invent, what have we done? We've left out the to direct. That's not what I meant to do. We leave out the to direct. And so that makes it non-parallel. Does that make sense? Good. We want to make sure that we follow the same pattern that we've been following when we are looking at parallelism. And so you'll get some more practice with that. In fact, one item is going to, or some items might look at both faulty parallelism and correlative conjunctions. So you need to understand those correlative conjunctions and study those. And so here you've got about correlative conjunctions and what they're used for. You will always see these in pairs. Correlative conjunctions would always be used in pairs. Make sure if you see those and you study what that pair is, you make sure that you complete that particular pattern. So if you see either, you can't have either and nor. You cannot have that. That is wrong. If you use nor, you have to use neither. If you use either, you have to use or, right? So don't use either and nor. Make sure that all of your patterns follow. Here, the roller coaster ride was both thrilling. If we're using both, we have to use what? And. It was both this and that. If it was but scary, what goes with but? If we continue with this pattern, the but, we would change this both to what? Not only. The roller coaster was not only thrilling, but scary. So you see you're not going to have a lot of these parallelism questions, and sometimes your parallelism and your conjunctions will go together, especially with the correlative conjunctions. So understand that, and that's why in today's lesson I put these two skills together: the conjunctions, the subordination, coordination, as well as the parallelism, because it's important that you follow those patterns and you understand how all of that works. So that is all that I have for you today. Until next time, happy learning.